It started with a lie, so small that people barely noticed, yet so emotive that millions felt instant sympathy, and cleverly placed to make Kody Brown come off like the heartbroken father instead of the man who caused the distance in the first place. This single lie was the spark that would ignite the biggest storm the Brown family had ever seen. For over a decade, the world watched Kody Brown on Sister Wives. Viewers saw him as the head of a vast polygamous family, a man juggling 4 wives and 18 children, a father trying to hold everything together under the pressure of cameras and complicated relationships. On television, he laughed and argued, cried, and preached about family unity. He looked like a man carrying the emotional weight of the entire family on his shoulders. But behind the scenes, it was different. Off camera, the family cracks were widening, wives were pulling away, children were becoming quiet, and behind each dramatic scene was something deeper, just beyond the audience's sight. Kody seemed confident that he controlled the narrative and that only his version of events would reach the public. That illusion was shattered the moment he uttered one emotional line. In a quiet moment on the show, Kody sat with a heavy expression. His shoulders hunched forward, his face full of pain, and his voice trembling with regret. He spoke of his son, the distance between them, the relationship that had fallen apart, and his longing to reconnect. Then he delivered the line that would become the center of a massive controversy. "I just wish I could have had a beer with my son." It was such a powerful moment. The way in which he articulated it was soft. It almost broke your heart. He sounded like a father missing his child deep inside. The audience felt it right away. Many viewers felt he was showing real remorse. A few even took his defense online, stating that he was trying his best and he just didn't know how to reach his adult children. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't see, was that this emotional statement wasn't true. The lie wasn't about the beer. It was about pretending he had tried, that he reached out, that he was longing for connection, when in actuality, he had done hardly anything. Kody's son did not walk away from him. Kody had walked away from his son long before this moment. For years, his children had tried reaching out, called, texted, invited. There were times they waited for him to show up, times they hoped he would call back, and times they wished he would just listen. But time after time, he was absent, not physically, but emotionally. He wasn't there to support them, guide them, or comfort them. Even when they clearly needed him, he found excuses or simply stayed focused on his favorite household. And then, suddenly, on national television, he acted like the broken-hearted dad who was begging for just a minute with his son. That was the lie. A lie crafted not for his children, not for his family, but for the viewers, so people could garner sympathy and say, "Look how much he's hurting, poor Kody." But the people who knew the truth were not willing to stay quiet anymore. And those people were his own children. The internet exploded when that episode aired. Viewers were emotional. They said things like, "Kody deserves a chance with his kids, and his son must have pushed him away." Many defended him, saying he was misunderstood and doing his best. But then the kids spoke up, not in anger, but in pain. They said Kody never tried to reach out. They said he didn't call, didn't visit, didn't check in on them. They said he created the distance. They said he acted like a father when the cameras were rolling, not when the family needed him. Their statements shocked the public. The emotional beer moment no longer looked like regret, but manipulation instead. The children's calm honesty hurt more than any anger could. They were not attacking him. They were simply showing the truth. And the truth was that Kody rewrote history to make it seem like he was the victim. As the drama escalated, it encouraged fans to dig deeper. They started rewatching older episodes, old interviews, social media posts, and everything they found supported the kids' claims. Clip after clip showed Kody blaming the kids for the distance instead of himself. In many scenes, he acted like his children were the problem, calling them disrespectful or rebellious. But in none of those clips did he take responsibility. In none of them did he show genuine effort. In none of them did he behave like a father trying to reconnect. What viewers started to realize was that Kody didn't forget what happened. He expected everyone else to forget. But the archives didn't forget. The children didn't forget. And now the viewers wouldn't forget either. This wasn't just a small lie. This was a pattern of twisting stories, shifting blame, and presenting himself as the one who suffered, while he ignored his contribution to the family's pain. And the saddest part is, it didn't have to be this way. He could have admitted he made mistakes. He could have reached out to his children sincerely. He could have rebuilt the relationship slowly and honestly. But instead, he chose the easy route, that emotional storyline which made him look sympathetic, even if it hurt the people he claimed to love. The wives noticed it too. Christine had already spoken up many times about feeling ignored and dismissed. Janelle could no longer defend his behavior. Mary stood by him the longest of anyone and had finally started to move away from him emotionally. Even Robin, the person who always supported him no matter what, couldn't stop the fallout from this lie. The lie wasn't dangerous because it was big. It was dangerous because it was believable. It was emotional. It was crafted to make millions feel sorry for him. And for a moment, it worked. But once the truth came out, the sympathy he had gained vanished instantly. People started seeing him differently. They saw a father who didn't take responsibility, a husband who didn't show up, a man who tried to rewrite the narrative instead of facing reality. Finally, the world saw the real Kody Brown. Not the father who wanted a beer with his son, but the father who wanted sympathy from strangers more than he wanted honesty with his family. This lie didn't just expose him. It destroyed the last remaining trust his children had in him. In many ways, it marked the beginning of the end of the entire Brown family structure. When Kody Brown had his teary "beer with my son" moment on national television, he was certain he'd uttered one of the most impactful lines of his career. His voice trembled as he spoke, and his face contorted with sadness. He let out deep sighs. Viewers felt the heaviness of his pain. Many people believed they were watching a man who was desperately trying to reconnect with a child he loved deeply. They saw a father shattered, a father regretful, a father longing for a bond he'd somehow lost. But while millions of viewers felt sympathy, there was one group of people who didn't feel the same way, his own family. Because they knew the truth. They had lived the truth. They had endured years of emotional distance long before this tearful monologue ever made it to television. The wives and children weren't watching a sad father. They were watching a performance. They were watching a story framed to make him appear as the victim. And this time, they refused to stay silent. The first to react was Janelle's children, who had borne the longest period of emotional separation. Her sons, in particular, had made repeated attempts to reach their father. They had waited for visits that never came. They had sent messages that he had ignored for weeks. They had hoped for conversations that never materialized. And so, when they heard their father talk about how much he wished he could have had a beer with them, They felt their hearts break, not because the statement was emotional, but because it was false. The kids didn't erupt into angry tirades. They didn't assault him publicly, but they did speak truth. He never tried. 3 words that weighed more than any melodramatic scene Kody had ever filmed, because they came from the place where the real damage lived, the hearts of children who felt abandoned. Christine's children followed. They had seen the favoritism firsthand. They had watched their mother suffer while Kody spent most of his time in Robin's home. They had watched him criticize them for not respecting his authority, while he offered no respect in return. They knew the distance wasn't an accident. It was because of choices he made over and over again. When they were asked about their father's emotional statements, they didn't hesitate. They said he often changed the story to make himself look better. They said he played the victim. They said he exaggerated to gain sympathy. Even Mary's child, a person who tried for years to stay neutral, acknowledged that Kody was rewriting history. According to the child, he was distorting the painful truth into a storyline that suited him. And when all 3 families spoke, Janelle's, Christine's, and Mary's, the internet listened. Suddenly, Kody's tearful confession wasn't heartwarming anymore. It was suspicious, manipulative sounding, like a man trying to garner sympathy rather than doing the real work of repairing broken relationships. What really made the situation even more explosive was the calm in the voices of these children. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't blame everything on him. They simply told the truth. And when someone tells the truth quietly, it cuts deeper than any angry rant ever could. The wives were no longer silent either. For years, they protected the family image. They tried to keep the peace. They tried to stand beside him even when they disagreed. But this time was different. This time, they had reached their emotional limit. Janelle, always the most steady and practical wife, spoke frankly. She said Kody wasn't making real effort with the children. She said he placed the responsibility on them rather than acknowledging his own mistakes. She said he often avoided communication, then acted surprised when the relationships deteriorated. Her words had not been designed to cut him. They were meant to portray the truth. She had seen her children cry because of their father's absence. She had watched them struggle with feelings of rejection. She had watched them pretend it never bothered them deep inside, when in fact, they cared so much. Christine, by then long gone from the marriage, didn't hold back either. She said she spent years feeling like a single parent. She said her children had to fight for their father's attention while others received it freely. She said she wasn't shocked that he twisted the story she'd seen him do it before. Her honesty was raw, coming from years of emotional exhaustion, years of waiting for him to show up, years of feeling like second or third place behind his favorite household. Mary, who through the years had publicly defended him as their relationship fell apart, finally spoke her truth. She said the emotional disconnect wasn't sudden. It had grown through the years. She said the children weren't the problem. She said the communication didn't fail. It simply never existed in the first place. What hurt the most was that even Robin, the wife he always defended, couldn't fully shield him anymore. She tried. She said he was hurting. She said he was misunderstood. She said he wanted a relationship with his children. But with every word she spoke, fans felt like she was trying to build a wall around him, not to protect his heart, but to protect his image. The audience saw right through it. They saw the pain of the wives speaking. They saw the children speak from truth. They saw Robin speaking from a place of loyalty rather than reality. This chorus of voices, wives, children, former family members, came together to create one clear message. They were done staying silent. And the internet responded with intensity. Fans filled social media with clips and reactions of the show. They put up old episodes where Kody contradicted himself, found interviews where he blamed the kids for pulling away without mentioning his absence, and found scenes where he dismissed his wife's feelings, yet demanded sympathy for his. Viewers began saying, "He changes the story every time. He wants sympathy without accountability. He's blaming everybody but himself." What became clear was that the emotional beer moment didn't expose his pain. It exposed his pattern. A pattern of rewriting the past. A pattern of turning every conflict into a story where he was innocent and everyone else had failed him. The more the family spoke, the more the audience saw the deep wounds. These were not small misunderstandings. These were years of neglect, years of frustration, years of emotional absence camouflaged by dramatic monologues. The wives had tried. The children had tried. The extended family had tried. And now, for the first time in this show's history, everyone but Kody was telling the same story. The true story. A story where the children weren't ungrateful. They were unheard. A story of wives who weren't disrespected. They were just ignored. It's a story about emotional distance that wasn't an accident. It was constructed through choices he made over and over. The family didn't stay silent because they were angry. They said nothing for years because they hoped he would change. But now, they were done. Done defending him. Done believing the show's version of reality. Done with letting him spin the story. This was the shift. This was the moment when the truth took over. This was the moment the Brown family finally stood up and said, it wasn't just tension that resulted from the fallout of Kody Brown's exposed lie. Whatever fragile trust remained inside the Brown family was shattered. The moment when children and wives spoke up almost in unison, the atmosphere around this family changed forever. It felt as if years of pain buried inside them, silent suffering, ignored emotions, and hidden truth were suddenly rising to the surface, each one louder than the last. And at the center of this emotional storm, with his eyes wide open, was Kody himself. Confused, defensive, frustrated, and wholly unprepared for this tidal wave of consequences coming his way. First, he tried to act as if nothing was wrong, as if his family was overreacting. He said his words had been misinterpreted. He was a good father who'd always done his best, and any gaps in the relationships were created by the children or their mothers. But this time, nobody believed him. Because this time, the wives witnessed the truth for themselves. They'd lived through the silence. They'd watched their children weep at night, wondering why their dad wasn't calling. They'd seen the birthdays and holidays, every big milestone in life, go by without a word from him. With his emotional lie exposed to millions, the wives were done protecting his feelings. Christine, the third wife, had been the silent one for far too long. For years, she had carried the emotional load of raising her children alone. She was the mother who consoled them when they felt forgotten. She was the one who tried to explain their father's absence in words as gentle as possible. But deep down, she knew the truth. Kody had chosen a different life. He had chosen a different household. He had chosen Robin. So when she saw him acting like he missed his son, something inside her broke all over again. It wasn't just a lie to the audience. It was a lie to her children, a lie to the family, a lie to the world. Christine didn't speak with anger when she tackled the issue. She spoke with heartbreak. She said she had begged Kody for years to pay attention to their kids, but he acted like it wasn't important. She said she watched their children give up on trying because their father kept shutting them out. But her honesty hurt viewers more than any sensational fight would have. Christine wasn't trying to expose him. She was just tired of hiding the truth. Then there was Janelle, his second wife, who had spent decades being rational and patient and trying to understand. She always tried to see the good in Kody. She defended him even when he didn't deserve it. But this time she didn't defend him. She couldn't. Because this time the lie wasn't about marriage or jealousy or house rules. It was about her children. And nothing angered Janelle more than seeing her kids get hurt. She said the kids had been through enough already. She said Kody wanted respect, but didn't give any back. She said he acted like a father only when the cameras were running. Janelle's voice wasn't loud, but it was firm. It was the voice of a mother who had reached her breaking point. Her calm honesty cut deeper than any shouting match ever could. Even Mary, the first wife, who despite everything had remained loyal to him, could no longer support his version of events. She said the emotional gap didn't happen overnight. It grew slowly, painfully, over years of neglect and miscommunication. She admitted she saw him distance himself from the kids long before the audience noticed anything. She tried talking with him about it, but he always brushed her aside. And now, upon seeing him crying on camera over a beer, she felt betrayed. But perhaps the most surprising shift came from Robin, the wife he favored the most. She had always defended him fiercely. She believed him, supported him, and repeated his words as if they were undeniable truth. She cried whenever he cried. She comforted him whenever he felt attacked. But now, even her attempts to defend him fell flat. Robin said that Kody was hurting, that he didn't deserve the criticism, and that he wanted a relationship with all his kids. But her words just didn't support the history. Fans remembered how Kody spent most of his time in her house. They remembered the moments when he admitted to feeling more connected to her kids than the others. They remembered his strict COVID rules, which seemed only to apply to the other wives and not her. No matter how hard Robin tried to defend him, the internet wasn't convinced. Neither were the other wives. But the most powerful voices of them all in this whole story were still the children. Because when children speak the truth, people listen. Their words came from memory, not manipulation. They remembered nights waiting for their dad to visit. They remembered calling and being ignored. They remembered holidays where he said he was too busy to come. One of the kids said, "He only shows up when he wants to look good." Another said, "He wasn't there when we needed him." Another said, "He didn't try, and now he acts like he did." These were not rehearsed lines, but lived experiences. For the first time, the world witnessed how Kody's decisions would bring out an emotional aftermath. They saw the hurt in the kids' eyes. They saw the disappointment. They saw the years of emotional abandonment finally coming to the surface. What made it even more painful was the fact that Kody still refused to take responsibility. Instead of apologizing, he became defensive. The kids were being dramatic. The wives were exaggerating. The internet was twisting his words. He acted like he was the one being attacked and completely ignored the pain he had caused. But the wives weren't having it. Christine said, "This is not about you." Janelle said, "Stop blaming the kids." Mary said, "Own your part." For the first time in family history, all three ex-wives were united, not out of anger, but out of truth. They wanted him to acknowledge the reality of what he had done. But Kody couldn't accept that. He built his life around the belief that he was a good father. Admitting the truth would mean admitting he failed. And that was something his pride wouldn't allow. This lie didn't just expose him. It destroyed the last remnants of trust the family had left. Trust isn't broken by one big event, but rather through years of small disappointments, ignored responsibilities, and empty promises. But a lie like this, a lie spoken publicly, emotionally, and confidently, that's the final push. That lie showed the wives that he'd take any story and twist it to save his image. It showed the children that their pain meant less to him than his reputation did. It showed the world the difference between the man Kody claimed to be and the man he truly was. The moment that he spoke those words, "I wish I could have had a beer with my son," he probably thought he was opening his heart, but in fact, he opened the door to a truth he had been avoiding for years. This was the lie that broke the illusion. It was the lie which revealed the emotional distance. This was the lie that finally broke the trust beyond repair. And once the trust is gone, there's no going back. The emotional storm inside the Brown family had been brewing for years, but no one, not the wives, not the children, not even the viewers, expected it to explode with such force. Something irreversible finally happened when Kody Brown's lie was exposed. It wasn't just another dramatic moment for the cameras. It wasn't just another disagreement that could be softened in editing. It wasn't something to be swept under the rug with a long speech, a few tears, or a shaky apology. This time, the world refused to look away. This time, the truth drowned out the narrative. This time, the real Kody Brown stepped into the light, and people finally saw him clearly. At first, Kody didn't think the backlash would last. He had weathered controversies before. He'd weathered wife fights, tension within the family, public backlash, and relationships breaking down. He always managed to pull the audience back in with emotional monologues or dramatic, vulnerable moments. And he thought this situation would be no different. But he underestimated the impact of a lie told about a child. He had underestimated the pain his children had been carrying. More importantly, he underestimated the intelligence and memory of his viewers, who had watched him live his life for almost 20 years. As the truth spread, sympathy for Kody disappeared almost overnight. Viewers who once defended him started questioning everything they had believed. What else did he lie about? How many times did he twist the story to save himself? How long has this pattern been happening? And the more they questioned, the more they realized that wasn't a new problem. The lie wasn't the beginning. It was the end. It was the moment that connected all the broken pieces of the Brown family story. The nepotism, the emotional absence, the controlling behavior, the manipulation, the excuses, the shifting blame. Everything suddenly fit into place. The wives saw it too, and for years, Kody had silenced their feelings with explanations, excuses, and promises of change that never came. They doubted themselves because he made them feel irrational or emotional. They believed him when he said the children were to blame, or their jealousy caused the problems, or their communication issues made everything fall apart. And yet, with one lie cracking open the truth, the wives at last saw what they had all been blind to. They weren't crazy. They weren't imagining things. They weren't overreacting. They were right all along. The world watched as finally the pieces fell into place for the entire family. And what they discovered was heartbreaking. Christine saw she had spent years waiting for a husband who never chose her. She saw that her children were being punished emotionally for things they hadn't done. Mary saw that her loyalty had been used, not appreciated. Even Robin, who had always been shielded by Kody, started to see snippets of the reality she didn't want to believe, that he wasn't hurting because of the family. He was hurting because he finally lost control. And the children? They saw their father's true colors more clearly than anyone else. They had masked their hurt with jokes or silence, put up with scraps of affection he tossed their way, blaming themselves for what had gone wrong, until they heard him rewriting history in public. Something inside them finally snapped after all these years. They didn't scream. They didn't fight. They didn't attack. They simply told the truth. He wasn't there. He didn't reach out. He didn't try. Those three statements held more power than any dramatic speech Kody had ever delivered. The truth didn't need music, editing, or emotion. It spoke on its own. And the world listened. People all over the world began to take sides with the children. They saw their quiet pain. They saw their honesty. They saw their strength. And as they chose to believe these children, something inside Kody began to crack. He couldn't control the narrative for the first time. He tried to defend himself in interviews. He said he was misunderstood. He said the wives were turning the kids against him. He said he was the victim of a smear campaign. But no matter what he said, the truth had already taken over. Viewers were simply no longer buying the story. The sympathy that once was commanded was gone. People started saying things like, "His kids aren't lying. He is rewriting the past. He wants to be the victim in every story." He wasn't only losing his family's trust, he was losing the trust of the world. As days turned into weeks, the emotional weight of the situation began pulling apart the last threads of the Brown family. Each wife, once connected under the belief that they were building something together, now stood firmly in their own truth. The unity that once held them together completely dissolved. Christine had long since rebuilt her life. Her happiness, independence, and confidence were glaring proof she'd made the right choice. She didn't need Kody's validation any longer. She no longer cared about his narrative. Hurt, but strong, Janelle refused to let anyone manipulate the truth about her children. She knew her children better than anyone. She knew what effort they put in. She knew the pain they carried. And she knew one thing for sure. Kody's lies weren't just hurtful, they were dangerous. Mary, once loyal to a fault, finally saw that loyalty meant nothing when it wasn't returned. She'd spent years defending a man who had never once defended her in return. And silence, no longer a weakness for her, was now her strength. And Robin, still emotionally tied to Kody, had to face the uncomfortable reality that even she could no longer shield him from the truth. But the most powerful shift came from the fans, for the fans had become the judges. The court of public opinion was the courtroom, and every shred of evidence, every clip, every interview, every contradiction was presented before millions of viewers. And the verdict was clear. Kody Brown had been exposed. Exposed not by haters, not by strangers, but by the people he said that he loved the most, his own family. Everything changed in that instant. The trust was gone. The connection was gone. The respect was gone. The sympathy was gone. And once the world saw the real Kody Brown, the man behind the emotional performances, there was no going back. This wasn't just the fall of a man. It was the end of an era built upon emotional manipulation, an era built on control, an era built on half-truths and shifted narratives. Now, for the first time, the world saw the truth clearly. Kody didn't lose his wives because they stopped loving him. Kody didn't lose his kids because they turned against him. Misunderstandings did not cause Kody to lose his family. He lost them because trust can only break so many times before it disappears forever. He lost them because love cannot survive lies. He lost them because the truth always wins, even if it arrives late. When the dust finally settled, one thing became undeniable. This lie, this emotional, calculated, sympathy-seeking lie, didn't just expose the cracks in the family. It exposed the man he truly was. That is a truth that will endure longer than any episode, any storyline, or any speech he could ever give.